right. Well, I think we can get started. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to some of you guys. Thanks for joining us. It's been a while since we've done a webinar. So I'm going to go through some housekeeping notes first. To introduce myself, my name is Rachel. I'm on the marketing team here. I'll be your moderator for today's event. And for today's presentation, Hybrid App Development Redefined, it will be brought to you by our very own Matt Netkow, Head of Developer Relations at Ionic. Hi, Matt. So before getting started on the presentation, I'd like to go over some housekeeping notes for you. First, the webinar is being recorded, and we're going to send you an email with a link to the recording and slides after the event is finished. So you will be able to revisit this content later on. The presentation will be about 45 minutes, and then we're going to use that remaining time to answer your questions. So feel free to submit questions during the event. To do this, all you have to do is click on that Q&A icon on your screen, and we'll get to as many as we can after the event. And then additionally, if you have any technical issues or concerns, you can send me a message in that same Q&A box, and I'll try and respond to you directly. So with all of that said, I'm happy to pass it over to Matt for the presentation. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. And thanks everyone for joining us. I am Matt Netkow, head of our developer relations team here at Ionic. Thanks for joining us for modern hybrid app development. Let's get started. Lots to talk about today. Today's agenda, we've got a lot. Oh my goodness. So first we're going to talk about the mobile delivery gap, and then talk about hybrid, how we tackle that particular gap. Basically the issue of software development teams being overwhelmed with their app backlog and having to deliver so many different types of apps to their business and customers. We're going to talk about how they might go about that with the native approach and then the hybrid approach. Stay tuned for a live demo. I'm going to show off a lot of new features of the Ionic platform and just the hybrid app development approach in general. And kind of wrap things up with an overview of the platform and everything that we demoed. And of course, as Rachel said, leave your questions. We've got a live Q&A portion at the end. So please stick around for that and drop those into the chat widget at any time. So the mobile delivery gap. Let's start before we dig into the differences between hybrid and native, let's talk about what exactly the most common issue that we see software development teams running into today, which is this delivery gap. What exactly is that though? Well, as you're probably already aware and living this day to day, more and more companies, regardless of industry, are having to embrace software development at its core, right? That's any industry from banking to retail, manufacturing, anything. And the reason for this is as new technologies come up, businesses have to really embrace that in order to survive. It literally, as John here shows us, life or death over the next few years in terms of embracing consumer apps, mobile apps, all those different types of things. But that's easier said than done, right? Just because that pundits out there put that out there, and we know that it's hard to keep up with this. The challenge is building fast enough is really challenging because you have these internal and external apps that you need to deliver on, and it's becoming overwhelming. From Gartner's quote alone here, we see that especially mobile, which is what we're going to focus on today, is growing 5x faster than software teams can deliver. So that's a really scary stat and something that we see all the time with the teams that we're working with. So how do teams typically address this backlog of the applications that they have to deliver, right? Well, we're going to start with one of those approaches, which is the native approach, all right? And specifically though, let's take a really high level step back. What exactly is a native app, right? Well, these are built specifically using technology that's specific to devices and platforms. So think anything from, of course, mobile devices, but also your Blu-ray player, microwave, anything like that. There's going to be specific developer tools, user interface guidelines, and software development kits that a manufacturer creates and hands out to development teams to build on their platform, right? So what's really great about that, of course, is it's built specifically and targeted with that in mind. So you get full device functionality. Any feature that you would like to implement is going to be possible because it's built specifically, again, for that platform. On the mobile side of things, we have, in the programming language world, the languages we use for that on iOS are Objective-C and Swift, and then Java and Kotlin on the Android side. let's look at some of the benefits of native, which of course is still a very popular choice for mobile app developers today, or those that are looking to deploy their apps or build new apps for mobile, right? And the first one, of course, comes to mind probably is performance, right? Because you're building with the manufacturers or the development kits specific tools that are built for that. Out of the box, you're going to get the best raw performance, bang for your buck. Oftentimes can be faster than other alternative ways of building apps. Additionally, you have access to rich native libraries because that's going to be provided from the provider of the native platform. You're able to access those latest features specifically designed for those without added complexity at all. And last, you have less dependencies on third parties. While there's always going to be third party, other open source tools or other companies providing tools for native platforms, you have the option to build exclusively with native SDKs and produce great looking, feeling, and experiences with those apps. However, like any approach, there are some challenges with native and some drawbacks. Probably the most important one is higher cost. It is more expensive to go with the native approach because you're building for each platform, right? You have those specific tool sets and that specialized knowledge that needs to be built up or hired for. In the case of talent, you have hiring developers is a lot more difficult because you're looking for experts in a particular field or technology. And as a result, you can often encounter longer development cycles, longer sprints, etc. Because when building for multiple platforms, you're going to end up with 2, 3, or more code bases that you have to maintain. So if you think about communication on dev teams with different groups and managing that between marketing and the business as well, it's oftentimes is a recipe for reduced velocity and the ability to ship code out and new features can be impacted there. And additionally, this is kind of a nice little view of what that fragmentation looks like across different dev teams, right? You'll have specific teams, especially on the mobile side, iOS versus Android, and the web team, maybe even a desktop team if you're building desktop websites or native apps. And the challenge there again is those separate code bases. Maybe how often have we seen in real other cases, whether the companies you work for, where the iOS app gets ahead of the Android app, which gets ahead of the web app, feature parity and managing that, staying consistent, and delighting your users and customer base can be really challenging because of that. And perhaps another great impact to mention here is the lack of code sharing. Because you're using those specific native technologies, you have to, with the native approach, re-implement the same functionality across each platform. And of course, that's again for feature parity. That's easy to get wrong as different developers interpret requirements differently, and all those types of things that can happen with fragmentation. And last, again, native talent can be harder to find and retain because, as we see here from a recent Stack Overflow survey, less than 7% or so of professional devs are even familiar with native mobile development technologies. So when you're thinking about long-term projects and investments, multi-year projects, you have to be certain that you're going to have that talent in-house or be able to find it. And that could be significantly harder with native. So with that said, it's probably no surprise if you're coming and you're joining us today that Ionic is all in on the hybrid approach. We're big fans of it. And so let's talk about that next and look at some of the pros and cons. But first, again, what is a hybrid app exactly? There's a lot of confusion out there, and I hope to address some of that today and talk about a lot of the highlights. So specifically, it's an app that embraces both web and native technology. So it's a blending of both with the goal of hitting the best of both of those worlds, right? And how this specifically works is you build your user interface, all of the logic, for the most part, all of the logic of the application. And then what we do is wrap that inside of a native app shell. And how that user interface runs, because it's using web technology, so JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, it runs inside of a web view, which is essentially an embedded browser. So you can kind of see from our image there how that might look like conceptually. And what that does, though, is allows us to take our existing web app or build a new one and deploy that for mobile and other platforms. And what's really great about it is you you still have access to all of your device functionality. So think about Bluetooth, geolocation, camera support, and all different types of authentication. Pretty much anything, you access that through native plugins. The code is still native, but there's techniques and other ways to expose that over to the web development team so that they can use that in a cross-platform way. So that's really cool stuff. We'll look at that very shortly. So all in all, a hybrid app is a native app. They can be deployed to the app stores. They can be deployed as progressive web apps. And to your end user, the experience is the same. They get great performant apps that can be used and deployed everywhere. Specifically, let's dig into some of the benefits a little bit here. So what I really love is you're able to use web technologies, your common building blocks of the web that have been around for decades now, and build for any platform. And it's just one code base. We see here, you take your web app and deploy it to multiple destinations. You can start with the web, and depending on as your needs evolve as a developer or as a business, you can share them out and deploy them into other spaces. And when you think about your design system, your company branding, all those different concerns, it can be really challenging to keep those aligned, especially over time, over many years of different products put out, different marketing sites. So what we found working with teams is the web is really great for managing that as well, because you can share that design across those different destinations as well and keep that brand consistency that's really hard to maintain if you go with a native approach. You're building that, again, over and over again. Additionally, you have an existing web development team, most likely. Everyone has a website today. You have probably internal web apps powering the business internally or externally, perhaps. And so what you can do is use that web development skills, reuse their existing skills to build and deploy to mobile, especially iOS and Android being the top favorites and most popular. So you still have that single code base, single team, and you're able to do a lot with that hybrid app approach. And speaking of the abundance of web talent, so what's really fascinating is we have, more than 10x availability of 10x more 10x more web devs than native devs. So when you're looking for, hiring and building out those projects, multi-year projects long, you have to make sure that you have that talent pipeline coming in. And why not use the web development stack, right? It's the most widely used stack. It's been around for decades and still going strong. And you can tap into that your existing workforce and talent. And not to mention from a careers perspective, there's all this great existing educational content, courses online. So even if you have teams of developers that are switching over to web development, junior web devs, there's a lot to get ramped up on, so it's a lot easier to get started as well. All right, well, you might be saying, okay, Matt, that's, sounds all well and good, but maybe you did try hybrid app development a few years ago, or you've tried web technologies and had run into issues, and I totally understand that. So let's take a look at some of the issues with, the past, basically before we look into the modern age, 2020 and beyond, let's look at some of the legacy issues with hybrid app development. Specifically, some of the cons here, really what it boils down to is challenges with the native layer. And that makes sense because the original mantra, the goal of hybrid app development is to allow web developers to deploy over to native, especially iOS and Android, without having to spend months or years becoming experts in those tech stacks. That's really what that's about. But of course, inevitably, you're going to run into what we call the native barrier to entry, right? Because at the end of the day, you might use an off-the-shelf open source plugin or other types of things available. You're going to run into situations where you need to do something over in native land with a plugin or some kind of unique device feature, and you're not able to implement it yourself. So that's definitely part of the challenge there is what do you do when you get stuck? Additionally, we have a little bit of a performance hit, some system overhead with embedding a web view into a native app shell, basically the approach there. So because you're running it, the web code, basically the root of the app inside of a web view, there can be a small performance hit there. And when you think about, again, the native app ecosystem and accessing different plugin features, there's thousands of available Cordova and Capacitor plugins out there that offer different camera, geolocation, all that kind of functionality. But what happens when your business needs something a little bit more custom, or really you run into bugs or errors, maybe the latest iOS doesn't work suddenly? What do you do with that? So the challenge there is, because oftentimes a lot of the open source ecosystem is run by maintainers in their own time, spare time, you get issues with maintenance, long-term stability, security and bug fixes. How do those get fixed, if at all? That's often a real challenge. And furthermore, if you tried out the hybrid app approach in the last few years, it's been around for 10 plus years now as, a very valid development approach, you might have encountered a jumble of different options and been overwhelmed with having to glue different pieces of them together. There was really no one cohesive platform available to build hybrid apps, okay? You likely used Cordova as your native runtime. So that takes your web app and helps bundle it into that app shell and allow you to deploy it to the iOS and Android app stores. And then on a general UI building blocks, components, and tooling perspective, you did have a lot of great players that came up, but just offered one piece of the puzzle, often the user interface, not the native part, not any other types of features. So there were some that made some early attempts at this. Additionally, DevOps, mobile DevOps especially, wasn't really a thing. It was really up and coming 10 years ago or so. So our continuous integration type of options really were lacking, even in the cloud space. It's come a long way, of course, now. We all know that today from all the big cloud providers. But back in those days, we mostly had Adobe's PhoneGap build system, which was a way to package your web app into a native build, but that was about it. Not a lot of automation behind there, and still a lot of manual work to deploy those binaries into the App Store. So a lot of work behind that, and tons of options to explore. But here, what we're going to focus on for the rest of the presentation, I'm really excited to talk about a fresh look into what modern hybrid app development looks like today. Let's get into some of those benefits. The first one is cutting edge web technology. So what's really great is things have evolved in especially the JavaScript world immensely in the past 3 to 5 years. It's incredible, honestly, what you're able to build. You're able to take and use this technology that's all open source and free and build complex front-end experiences really easily, much easier than before. So, there's a variety of aspects to this. You've got frameworks and UI libraries like Angular, React, and Vue, or Ionic's own Stencil for building web components that can be deployed anywhere. And then, of course, UI component libraries that specifically target mobile devices now, like Ionic Framework, Material UI, all these different ones that work with those key frameworks, the most popular around. So that alone, starting off and building an app that looks beautiful and works out of the box is really simple. Additionally, on the JavaScript front, you've got, honestly, a lot of great changes that have brought JavaScript, the language, up to par with other programming languages that other developers have enjoyed for years. So TypeScript from Microsoft gives us proper types in JavaScript, which helps you avoid bugs and regressions in your code. And even just built into the browser, JavaScript features have come a long way, definitely a long way. Furthermore, from honestly, not only the business, but from developers' perspectives, and the career aspects are just incredible with web technologies, because JavaScript is now the #1 programming language in the world. And that is because it's used everywhere. So the number of opportunities available, as we saw, that 10x stat doesn't come from nowhere. Partly why that is, why there's 10x more web devs, is the ability to use it to build all different types of apps, not just websites, not just web apps. You can go way beyond that. So in addition, you see it used with CLI tooling, command line interface tooling, client and server side, and even Internet of Things types of apps. So it is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. And with different, there's also different techniques that have arrived or have become a little bit more standardized and easy to use, like server-side rendering, building progressive web apps that can enhance existing websites and web apps like never before, and even things like the Jamstack for building static sites. So all these great things just make, starting off in web development or evolving your knowledge so much more powerful than before. Additionally, this is, when you're looking at and thinking about native runtimes, what I'm going to highlight today is Capacitor, which is Ionic's spiritual successor to Cordova. We took a number of different lessons from Cordova, Ruby on Rails, all these different types of other server-side technologies, all different types of tech, and applied them to a new modern approach for a native runtime. And at the end of the day, what a Capacitor's goal is to connect your web-based apps over to native functionality, both from the native project standpoint as well as tapping into native APIs and plugins. So you can take your progressive web app and deploy it to iOS, Android, and other platforms. Again, that goes back to that one code base mantra that we've talked about. A couple of key highlights, though, to mention here is we really embrace a code once, configure everywhere mantra, which basically means that we're embracing the modern tooling that Xcode for iOS and Android Studio for Android, any of those that they provide. So before, with Cordova and others, there was a little bit of an abstracted system and configuration that developers would work with. And the problem there is it would do a lot for you, but when you ran into issues, various specific operating system bugs, you'd often be stuck. You wouldn't know where to go, how to get help, find help online, etc. So by embracing more modern tooling and leaning into those IDEs and other SDKs that native gives us, it results in easy project maintenance. You're able to debug apps a lot easier, as well as one of my favorites, web development teams and native teams can work together because they can work on the web app or the native specific projects and collaborate and come together as needed. Additionally, Capacitor puts a focus on standards. So there's, when you think about, betting on a long-term strategy and a platform that's going to be there, we really highlight and talk about the web platform, of course, and browsers. But we wanted to do with Capacitor is if we're going to give you web-focused APIs, we want to make sure that they embrace web standards. We're not building anything custom that you're going to have run into issues. It's all built on standard web technology. And if you have any existing Cordova apps, you'd be delighted to know that Capacitor is 99% backward compatible with it. We've done a lot of work to ensure that for the most part, with just some minor exceptions, your plugins will work with Capacitor. So there's an easy migration process. I hope you check that out. But it's really easy to get started and roll into this modern tooling without a lot of headaches at all. Additionally, what's really great about the modern hybrid app stack is we're really looking at embracing the web first as a way to future-proof your technology investment and your applications. So you likely heard, going back a few years now, of the mobile-first strategy, which is pretty much what it sounds like, the idea behind building for mobile, iOS and Android first, and then maybe coming back and deploying an app for web apps, websites, right? Well, here at Ionic, we're actually kind of flipping that a little bit on its head, and we're actually, more so leaning into progressive web app first and see that as the future. And why is that, right? Why would that be? Well, there's a number of great benefits with, again, starting with web development for your app development strategy. The first one, of course, is getting to market faster. When you're building for the web, you're in complete control. There's no gatekeepers like the app stores that might block your software from getting out. You have the beauty of the web is that it's open to everyone, and you can experiment, you can ship quickly. And what is if you think about really the benefit of that, you're able to run experiments quicker, acquire users much faster, and then iterate from there. So when we're thinking about modern cycles, and again, that delivery gap of needing to release software quickly, can't beat the web. You really can't. Additionally, if you find the need then, and you reach success or whatever your goal of a software project is, you're able to deploy to iOS and Android when ready. Again, that's something like Capacitor or other tools you could use to do that. But you don't necessarily need an app store presence. When you're ready, you're able to do that though. And if you stick with a PWA, your users can install it to the home screen like a native app anyway. So there's lots of options there on the progressive web app front. Additionally, I talked about how when we started long ago, cloud providers were really, it was really not so great days back then in terms of automations. If you're managing a backlog of hundreds of apps, thousands of apps, depending on your company size, it has to be a nightmare to manage and keep them up to date, right? Well, the hybrid app approach really enables mobile dev apps, mobile DevOps superpowers, right? Because on the web front, again, much like the PWA approach, most of your application logic and UI updates, branding is controlled with the web. So it's really easy to deploy those changes. We'll talk a little bit about Ionic app flows services, and I'll show how that works, that allow you to deploy quickly. And then additionally, there's been lots of improvements across different providers to build and deploy the native app binaries. And specifically with providers like AppFlow, we can now deploy from taking a single code commit and bundling that up all the way shipping directly to the app stores, which is really exciting. So, automate away all of these tedious challenges with building apps so that you can focus on what matters, which is fixing bugs, running tests, and just in general, delighting your users with new features, right? And you might say, well, that sounds great again, Matt, but are developers really embracing hybrid? Isn't native the best way to build apps? Again, because of all those, pros of native. And as we see from a couple different stats here, we were delighted even ourselves to learn recently that from App Figures, digging into the App Store and Google Play install metrics, that in fact, over 33% of apps on the App Store and 50% of apps on the Google Play Store are hybrid based. So that is, really wild numbers in just a few short years. In fact, from some other research that Forrester has done, they've determined that in over 2/3 of devs are now choosing a cross-platform / web-based approach over native. So what does that actually translate to? We're talking major brands that are building using hybrid app technology and development, millions of developers embracing it, and billions of dollars at stake here. We have endless examples, but here's just one that I particularly wanted to highlight, especially in these times. Sanvello is an award-winning mental health app with millions of users and really high ratings on the app stores. Go check that out. But what I love about this team is the ability, what they're able to focus on with the hybrid stack, as they say here, is iterating on new features really quickly without getting bogged down with the intricacies of native development. So talk about a team, that's really what this unlocks. The ability to move faster, not only get through that backlog, but there's real tangible results here with and you're talking mobile store, high app reviews, and it translates to millions of users. Those that can ship fastest are going to win. So, enough of all the pros and cons here. Let's actually get into a demo, and I'll show off a lot of these different techniques and things. So let's kind of take a look at that. Specifically, I'm going to show off Ionifits, which is an app that our team has been working on. It is a human resources type hybrid app. I'm going to do, let's pop out of here. I'm going to do a little cross-platform feature tour and show off a bunch of Ionic's technology and whatnot. So give me a second here. Okay. So basically what this app does is it allows us to sign in and authenticate into it, and provides a directory of employees and pseudo type of company application, as well as do expense management with expense receipts and integrate settings and all that type of stuff. So let's look at some of the great features. So what's really great about the Ionic stack specifically when you're building for hybrid is you have a number of great features here that allow us to develop and deploy changes and work locally really quickly. So what I'm doing here is I have this running in a web browser here, and over on the right here is my code. And what I'm doing is I actually have it mimicking an iPhone and iOS basically. I'm presenting here on a PC here at home, and so to kind of show off what iOS would look like, and then I'm going to show Android as well so that we kind of get a glimpse at web, iOS, and Android. Specifically, what I love is, this is our login screen, of course, and what I love about working with Ionic and Hybrid is we have great tooling that allows you to develop and make changes, fix bugs, and everything locally. So specifically, I'll just do a couple things around theming and some of the messaging. So, maybe, for example, over here, these are my CSS variables, which are exposed as part of Ionic Framework apps that allow us to manage our colors, primary, secondary, etc., across the app. So let's actually look at what that means. Right now, I'm using a type of blue for the primary color there for the buttons, and maybe we want to change that to green, right? So we can do that and save, and then I'm going to pop over to my login page, and here we say you can see that we have the welcome to Ionifits messaging with the login buttons. Maybe we want to say, welcome to modern hybrid, right? So little trivial examples, but as you saw from the screen refreshing, the color, and in fact, the green color here took effect, and as well as my messaging for the intro to the app. So, very straightforward kind of examples, but whether we're changing HTML or editing JavaScript logic, we can, develop and make changes really quickly, which helps with our velocity and finding and fixing bugs before they even happen. We're going to come back to the login experience at the end here. I'm going to skip here and go into the app and kind of show this off. Next up, we're looking at our employee directory page here. So what this highlights is loads up all of my employees in my company, and I've got really fast performant scrolling here. And that's just using, this is an Angular app, as it turns out. So this is using the Angular CDK for some of the scrolling and that performance out of the box. And then all I'm doing here, you can see, basically this is just a list of, with rows of individual employees, right? Very straightforward. Let's look exactly at what this looks like from a markup standpoint. So anything that starts with Ion is an Ionic framework component. It's just plain HTML. When you learn, or when you integrate Ionic framework into your apps, there's really not too much to learn about Ionic. You just use your normal, again, HTML and CSS skills and things like that. So specifically looking at each row here is an Ion item, and that just kind of defines a container for us. And we're basically looping through for this whole list, my list of employee data, and writing out some different elements to the page. So specifically, it's probably, I love this because it couldn't be more readable, whether regardless of your development background and whatnot. But we've got our avatar over here representing their profile picture, and that's just a simple tag pointing to an image source there. And then from the label, we want to, of course, show their first and last name, their title, their office, and I'm just using a label component along with some paragraph tags. So nothing too wild there, right? And then I'm able to embed and link over into different pages, some of their employee detail pages. I wanted to call out, though, some of the benefits that, especially for mobile, that Ionic Framework is giving me here. So not only does this look great with different colors and just the alignment of all these details like the text and colors and things like that, and the arrows here, right? But you'll notice as I, let me scroll up a little bit, look towards the top where that people designation is as I flip back. So you'll notice that header's shrinking as I scroll, and then as I come back, it changes over, right? Additionally, I have a little implementation modal. So for anyone that wants to check out this app, with the goal behind this is to talk about what features and components and native features are being used, right? So I've added that, and when I click on this, it pops up. And so you'll notice, again, I'm mimicking iOS here. This is how it would look and perform on a real device. And you'll notice that smooth animation and this style where the modal doesn't quite take up the whole screen. That's an iOS 13 and above type of style, along with this header collapsing, right? That is all built into Ionic Framework and provides you with all these great mobile animations and gestures that, frankly, your development team doesn't want to spend their time re-implementing, right? Why do that work when you have to ship real apps and you have real deadlines? You don't want to be, caught in these type of details, right? You don't want to be mired by these details. So one of the great things that I love calling out about Ionic Framework is all these, kind of transitions that happen. Even when we go into sub pages here, look at the back button and the people header, how that slides in and out. I did not program that at all. I have no idea how to do that personally, but the framework does that all for me with, again, just some simple code and HTML. So that's really, really, really cool. Next, let's look at the expenses page and scenario that I built here. I'm going to pop over to my expense service, which kind of is an Angular class, service class that wraps the functionality that's going to do some really neat stuff. So I'm actually going to temporarily turn off my camera so that I can use the webcam for the demo here. So I'll be back in a second. I'm still here, don't worry. And what this is again, think about how in any company that you work for, maybe you travel for a conference, or, well, back when we used to travel for conferences, or, you have to expense some office supplies. Everyone has that kind of use case. So that's what this covers, right? So if we pop open our modal here and add a new expense, maybe I went over to, Home Depot to pick up some supplies for the office. And, we can say, I don't know, cost me $80. And that was, I don't know, a couple days ago, right? And look at the category. We definitely want to expense this, so let's call that an office one. But of course, like most companies, the Ionifits company, requires that I submit a receipt. So, I hope I have that. I do want to get paid for this, right? So we have that integrated. So I'm going to click this camera button, and here I'm back, right? Here's my receipt. Let's take a picture of that and check that off. Awesome. So that's integrated there. So let's take a pause and see exactly how I did that. So this particular app is integrated with Capacitor, again, which is our native runtime solution that gives you access to, in this case, the camera and tons of other native APIs, both on the web like we're here, and iOS and Android and beyond, different platforms. So let's zone in on this capture expense receipt. So this method and function is wired up to my camera button over here. And, let's take a notice. So really what I love about this is we're just calling camera.getPhoto. And as it says, it prompts the user to take a new photo or pick a photo from their album with the camera. And we just have a couple configuration options. I really want my department to approve that receipt, so I'm going to put it the highest quality, for example. There's some other things you can do there. But what I really wanted to call out is the ability to, you'll notice that there's no mention, I'm running on the web, and what you'll notice is there's no mention of iOS, Android, web, right, in this code. It's just camera.getPhoto. So that's the beauty of Capacitor and using these native APIs, is that for the web developer, that native code is abstracted away. And from a cross-platform approach, and as I talked about using one code base and deploying it everywhere, that's it. This is it. And it runs everywhere. So really powerful capabilities, and with great features. So back over here, I'm going to add that, and now it falls under my list of completed expenses. So that's really cool. I can actually go back and load that up again. Maybe I got the price wrong on here, and what have you, right? And let's actually look at this on the Android side. So this is my Android Pixel connected to my computer right here. This is the exact same app with the exact same code over here running. Let's give that a quick try, right? We'll call this, maybe I made a mistake and I need to actually submit something else. Let's try this again and see how the camera works. All right, so here I am. Here's that same receipt. And awesome. So I'm able to capture that receipt. Probably should have rotated that before I send it off to the expense department, but I'm able to add that on my device. And as you see, there's some subtle differences between iOS and the icons and the styling, and this is on Android, right? So actually here we can kind of see even just the modals. This is full screen here on Android that Ionic Framework handles for us, and this automatically is using the iOS style. So really cool. Again, you'll notice that no mention of native specific code. It's just one function there. But of course, you might say, well, aren't there some differences when you're developing? And you might have to do some logic there. And that is true. You know, oftentimes between mostly web and native, you might want to run different logic, or just create a different experience with different, depending on the platform. So here we do have some helper functions. For example, with the camera, I'm using a test for whether or not we're running on a native platform like iOS or Android, or the web, and then providing a different path to the where that file that the camera took, and manipulating that differently. So that's just one example. So that still gives us, we still have that capability to change things when we want to and run on whatever platform. Sweet. So let's next look at authenticating this app. So, you know, we showed, I'll actually come back here. Hello. Okay. So we showed, you know, we've got this a directory of employees with their phone numbers, email, as well as expense management. We don't want to open that up to the world, right? We need some kind of login experience. We need to protect our employee data, right? So how do we do that? Well, what I'm going to show next is a couple native solutions from our Ionic Enterprise Suite that provide, you know, that are really built for teams building mission critical apps that can't afford to get security and data access, control and authentication correct, right? And nowadays, I don't think anyone can afford to get that wrong, right? There's too much at stake. So what I'm using here is Auth Connect. I'm going to configure that. And what happens is it's really nice. It's very straightforward, easy single sign-on. Great way to add that to your applications, any of your hybrid applications that'll work with. Specifically, I'm going to use Auth0. I'm really, really big fan of what they're doing, but it also works with Azure and AWS Cognito and your own custom solutions. So really any OpenID or OAuth provider will work with this. So all I have to do, this is just an exported configuration object that gets passed over to Auth Connect. Fairly easy to read here, right? I'm using configuring Auth Connect as my provider and Capacitor for the platform, a couple other details for the configuration. And then over in my authentication service, which sort of wraps that those details, when I click the login button here, which I'll do in a second, it's just going to call Auth Connect's login button with all those details, and allow me to sign in. So let me do that. This app is available. We'll send you the link and you'll see it in the presentation later. Anyone can use this as a test account. I'm going to sign in here. So when I sign in, that authenticates me and sends me back into the app, as you just saw. And all that really is required from the developer standpoint is I just have to handle this on login success. So when you authenticate correctly, you come back and I'm just saying here, hey, navigate to that employee page, right? This employee directory, and I'm in. And additionally, over in the settings, I can now log and see, like, this is my test account, so it's John Smith. I can see that I'm signed in, and I can also sign out. So if I sign out, same thing. That'll basically send me back to the login screen, and I'm protected. So really great solution for teams looking to secure their apps with a single easy API. Last, I'm going to kind of really give a quick high-level overview of the mobile DevOps space and what Ionic App Flow gives us. And specifically there, so this is my dashboard for Ionifits, the app we're just looking at. And as you'll see, all my commits as I was building this out and making tweaks for it not too long ago are here and listed. So you have all of your commits coming from Git or GitHub, right? And what you're able to do is say, okay, I'm confident that I'm ready to release this in some format on the web or on native mobile, right? I can easily, with a couple clicks, create a new build for iOS, Android, or even web deployments with our live update service. So what's really nice is, you know, you just set up your certificates one time, your security certificates, select if you're going to, you know, development or maybe the App Store, and hit build, and that's about it. Those builds over in our build tab show up here, and what's really neat is we'll see the status of them. I had some issues, so those failed, but in here we can see that we actually, you know, successfully built for iOS, and I can download the IPA and start testing that on my device, right? So send that out to your QA team, any business stakeholders that want to try it out. Is really easy, and all of that management and deployment is, you know, out of my concerns and out of my hands. If you were to find a bug in the application logic, when you think about how critical that can be when you have App Store review times that can take several days, oftentimes you don't want to wait that long. You want to be able to ship out updates that same day. So with our live update service as part of this, we're able to do that. It's all part of within Apple and Google's terms of service that you can do this. We can send these builds and different fixes out to them really quickly. Specifically, we've got here, I'm shipping this to staging. You can set up all different types of environments and deploy those out really quickly. We can select what deployment we need and deploy that. And then any of your users that have the app installed on the device get that update live and in minutes. It's really powerful. Last, I just wanted to call out our automation service for more of our commercial enterprise suite. Here I have, this is the really cool feature we've announced relatively recently, complete one-click deploy to app stores. So here you see I'm setting up a production build and deploy to the Apple App Store, and as well as a release build all the way from code commit to the Google Play Store. So all I'm doing is I just set up this simple little screen, and that's it, honestly. I'm putting it to my production branch. Maybe you'd call something else, something similar. I'm saying build and package the native app binary for it with my production environment variables. Of course, those configurations can change depending on the environment, and send it over to the App Store. And here we have our new destinations. I've got that enabled. And when we save, that's going to send it out directly to the App Store. I then go into those stores and deploy them, maybe set up some metadata and hit submit, and that's it. So all in all, end to end, that's our Ionifits app, and kind of a really quick tour of some of the Ionic app platform features, right? So you've got native quality UI components with the Ionic framework, native functionality with Capacitor. We used the camera, file, and storage APIs to interact with those expense photos, and when the app flow side and mobile DevOps, we saw how we could ship our app from code commit all the way to the stores. So let's take, kind of highlight again some of what it takes and what's involved with building hybrid apps with Ionic. So again, because of the hybrid app approach, embracing web technologies, you have options like Ionic Framework here that gives you over 100 mobile UI building blocks. It's mobile ready out of the box. You saw how cool those animations and gestures were provided for me that I didn't have to code myself. I love that. And additionally, it's fully customizable for your brand. We made a small little color change, but you can imagine the power behind styling those components to fit your design schemes and colors. Additionally, we have adaptive styling. So we saw that a little bit between the web and Android and iOS. There's subtle differences that users will notice when they're using your apps. And so you have to, in order to provide that look and feel at home type of scenario, you want components that are platform aware. So that's what Ionic Framework components do. They automatically switch their styles and animations to match those platforms, specifically iOS and Android for you. And we're constantly shipping the latest and greatest in terms of the latest UI trends. Yep. Additionally, as we saw, we have full native access, both with Capacitor. It unlocks the access and tap into any native SDK, use plugins if you need, or just configure the native projects directly. And we have security and storage solutions like Auth Connect and Identity Vault for securing and your access tokens and biometrics, things like that. And finally, with mobile CI/CD, things have come a long way. There's a lot of good providers out there in the cloud. And of course, AppFlow has a bunch of these things, basically allowing you to fully automate your mobile delivery pipeline and your web delivery pipeline to get out to your users as quickly as you want. And last, I wanted to bring up, if you're a team that's building mission critical apps, you're going to want to build on, have that peace of mind and build with a secure, reliable foundation, right? Because, the reality of, we love our open source and fully embrace that. But sometimes if you're looking for premium solutions, ones that are supported and constantly maintained, it's really a lot of work to have your teams be distracted by staying up on all those latest security requirements and different operating systems as they evolve are quite a lot to keep up with, right? So what Ionic Enterprise provides is mission critical support and expert native guidance from our team of native mobile experts. Let us stay on top of all those security, bug fixes, maintenance, new operating systems, all those things. We have your back. That's exactly what this is about, because at the end of the day, you want to focus on, shipping delightful app experiences and new features to your users. You don't want to get muddled down in anything related to native, especially with security and authentication, right? That's just no fun. So if you're interested in learning more, check out ionicframework.com/enterprise, and we'll be in touch. Last, let's kind of wrap this up. And again, please leave your questions on the side. I see some good ones coming in. That's awesome. Let's talk about, kind of bring it back to some of those hybrid concerns, because, it's easy to show off a real app and talk about all the pros. But I wanted to talk about, in a modern sense, how have these different concerns and cons really evolved in the 10 plus years that hybrid app development has been a thing. And let's start really with that performance hit. Everyone is, we get a lot of questions about web views. Are they, what's the performance like between native and web views and all that? And there, as we said, there is a small performance hit per se there, but honestly, today, it's quite negligible. It really is something, as you'll see, we saw the Android, the Ionifits app running on a device, really great, very fast and performant. That was an Ionic Angular app running there. And, the reality is, between web browser modernization and performance enhancements that Google and Microsoft and other teams provide for us, you also have powerful device hardware these days, with iOS and Android devices becoming more powerful, adding more RAM and other things. So honestly, it's really a concern from the past. It really is. The other really big elephant in the room with, of course, the hybrid approach is native, right? Because again, circling back, it's all about web developers that are embracing and trying to deploy their web apps to native platforms. But without knowledge of that, how do they do that? Well, the Ionic team specifically is taking a number of steps here to address that. So from our open source and just kind of developer ecosystem and support side of things, we've got great new plugin development documentation in Capacitor, as well as lots of educational and tutorials out there that help you make, from the smallest tweaks to your native apps to the largest changes. And, all different types of common use cases are now available in the doc. So that's what that link is for. Check that out. Additionally, we talked about how in open source, maintainers can come and go. Getting the latest bug fixes and pull requests approved can be challenging. So how do you deal with that, right? It is a massive scale type of problem. The Ionic team can't build every native plugin situation ever, right? It just doesn't, no matter what size company we would be, or any company, that would be really challenging. So our response to this is the newly announced Capacitor community. So what this is a new GitHub organization dedicated to Capacitor community plugins. And what we do is, as we have an audit process and a review process, and we only let in the highest quality and most maintained plugins into that organization as a way for you to comfortably know that they're going to be supported longer term and still be driven by the community, so that you can move fast and collaborate with others. So I'm really excited for that. It's a newer effort for us, but I'm looking forward to big things and all different types of scenarios covered there. So check that out. And last, for teams that, again, need that peace of mind, are building mission critical apps that have to be secure and, can't have to be up to date on the latest tech, check out Ionic Enterprise for all those types of needs. We have your back there. So to kind of circle back, how we started the presentation, if you have app teams that have this huge backlog, they're trying to deliver, especially for mobile, how are successful teams doing that, right? Well, perhaps unsurprisingly, they are using the Ionic platform, because it's a complete platform for building hybrid apps. No need to pull from all different types of sources and open source tech and unmaintained tech, right? We have a complete open source platform for you. So at the end of the day, with us, you can use the web development talent you have to get to market faster, to test new ideas or update legacy applications, all these different type of use cases. You've got a complete vertical stack that works for you and runs cohesively. So the benefit, of course, also is being able to reach any platform at a fraction of the cost. So it is expensive to place big bets on mobile, especially. So why not start with a PWA and evolve from there, as we talked about. And it's easy to build world-class apps because of Ionic's innovations and just the whole web ecosystem. It goes far beyond us, of course. The modern hybrid app stack is incredible. You saw some of those benefits today. I hope you'll check that out. And additionally, you might think, well, is this platform only for new apps? I have lots of legacy apps running. What do I do with those, right? You can't just abandon those. You can't rewrite everything. I know, I get it. Well, what's really great about Ionic is, you can do incremental adoption of the different pieces of the puzzle here, right? You don't have to, while we recommend the entire platform, of course, you can start with some of the upgrade them as you need. So for example, maybe you have a legacy app that needs a UI refresh. It's looking a little dated, a little challenging to use on different sites, maybe responsive challenges there. Well, pick up the Ionic framework and drop in some fresh UI components. Or maybe you have, an old web app that's still driving some crucial, business goals at your company. Deploy that to iOS and Android to reach more users or your mobile workforce with Capacitor, And then finally, if you do have an enormous backlog of apps, hundreds of apps, and you need to keep those updated, turn to AppFlow or other CI/CD tools to keep them updated and modernized, right? So lots of great options with the Ionic platform. All right, so let's get to Q&A. But first, if you want to get started with hybrid app development, check out ionicframework.com/start. We have a great app wizard that is completely UI driven, helps you get started and build a starter UI app and an Ionic app. Works really well, and we're constantly adding to that, so check that out. And again, if you want to check out our enterprise solutions, get in touch with us at the enterprise URL there. So awesome. That is my presentation. Again, I'm Matt Netkow. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's take some time for some questions. Let me pull up our Q&A. Okay. So Joseph has a great question about how AppFlow works with actually shipping apps to the App Store in the sense of the Google and Apple developer license. So is it required to have those licenses? So actually it is still required. Apple is $99 per year. And Google is, I think, don't quote me, but $30 once, like a one-time fee, which is kind of nice. That is, the cost of they charge that not only to keep low quality apps out of the stores and spam apps and things like that, but also they have real business costs behind running those platforms like the app stores, right? So that's why they charge that. So that is kind of independent of whether you build hybrid or native apps. They are required. But again, if you're building, especially if you're building in the business sense, they're mostly small costs. Of course, if you're, an indie dev, I understand that can be a little bit of a barrier to entry. But again, that's why we recommend starting with the progressive web app, because the web is open and free. And, that kind of fits in that narrative of if you reach success, you can easily, decide to make the investment into native and those app stores. Naveen has a great question about Capacitor. So does Capacitor handle opening custom written native camera in the web browser automatically? So that's a great question. So our camera API on the web uses built-in camera APIs from the browser. So you're a little bit, excuse me, you're a little bit restrictive there. Now, in terms of you have to use the browser's APIs. But you saw that the Ionifits app had the little window that popped up with a couple buttons to actually click and take the photo. That's a project that we built called Progressive Web App Elements that the app uses. That's a custom UI. So what's great about that is you can do custom different interactions. So if you wanted to give the user options to resize the image or flip the image around, all these, really the sky's the limit. You can do that. There is a little bit of limitation of what each web browser provides for how you actually capture a photo, but I would say all in all, you can definitely do that. And that's whether you do that through Capacitor or writing your own plugin, that's actually very feasible. Another one from David. Hey, David, are you able to publish over-the-air updates? So that's our live updates that for web updates for deployed Capacitor apps that use Vue for the client renderer. Yes, yes, you can. So what's great about AppFlow that I did not mention is it works with Ionic framework or any web framework. You're not restricted to it. Any modern web app that has a packaged JSON file, and which is most of the common frameworks built in the last several years, are able to use it. And in fact, if you check out our AppFlow documentation, I recently created a guide for those that maybe are using jQuery or some other legacy tech that want to now build their Cordova or older web app in AppFlow. It's totally feasible. So check that out. But yes, David, Vue is absolutely supported. Great question on web apps. So will web apps be banned from the app stores? So we get asked about this a lot, right? Understandable, because usually this comes up from Apple's App Store. They do tend to change their guidelines on HTML apps, as they call them, over time. But I can confidently say that no, they're not going to ban them from the app stores. I think the number one reason, of course, is the outcry. Of course, as you saw from those details, we've got a third to one half of apps are hybrid apps now. So imagine them, let alone other reasons, but wiping those out in one blow, the outcry would be massive. But not to mention, like, Apple does love the web. They're constantly investing in Safari, and especially on the security front, they do a great job and are really thoughtful about that. So honestly, any articles you see or other things like that are honestly just a lot of FUD. You can ignore that. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. We have thousands of customers using and deploying hybrid apps today and have never been rejected for using that technique. It is definitely not an issue. Any updates on Vue support? What about Vue 3 and things like that? So thanks for the question, Brad. I'm happy to share that Vue support is coming with Ionic Framework. We are actively working on it right now. We don't have an ETA, but we were specifically waiting for Vue 3 to launch so we can invest in the latest and greatest Vue tech there, right? And that's taken, honestly, that's taken the Vue team a little bit of time, as it does, right? This is hard to get right, of course. But I can share with you that the team is working on it now. Vue is beta right now. It's kind of being released right now. I know they're working on last fixes and documentation. So, look for that pretty soon. We're going to try to ship that as soon as Vue 3 is officially released, and we feel confident with, that we have a great solution and it's working well. But that is definitely coming. Let's see. Someone's asking what Capacitor's license terms look like. So that's MIT license. It's all free and open source. No restrictions. It's all freely available on GitHub. 99% of the work we do is open source today, with just some of, as you saw with Auth Connect and some of the enterprise kind of apps that are paid solutions, right, to help us drive and keep building the great stuff that we can do. So someone's asking about different Capacitor plugins, such as capturing video. So great question, Gabrielle. So I don't believe we have an official core plugin for that today. But again, check out the Capacitor community org. We've started adding, I think, a couple dozen community plugins already, and more to come on that. That can probably, I don't know for sure specifically that use case, but I would be very surprised if something that wasn't available soon from the community that would be able, that would make it able to capture video. That's a pretty common thing. Alex is asking about Capacitor Elements. So yeah, great question. So Capacitor Elements is a newly announced project from us. Look for information on that soon. We've just started working on that, so that's going to be a little bit. We announced it recently a few weeks ago at IonicConf, our very first online Ionic conference. And basically the idea behind that is it's going to be an evolution of the PWA elements library that I used actually to access the camera on the web in the demo. And the idea behind that is providing native UI quality type of UI components. So it's a little bit of overlap with how Ionic Framework works, but specifically we're going to have new experiences and components that are built especially for mobile to bring us in line and provide Capacitor with Capacitor apps with native UI quality type of experiences. So lots to come there, lots more to be announced. Stay tuned on that. The idea behind there is it's going to be available to any web app using Capacitor. So not tied to Ionic Framework per se, although of course it'll work great with it. But that's what that's all about. Let's see. Oh my gosh, so many great questions. Thank you, everyone. Let's see. So Maximilian is asking if I'd recommend using Capacitor for Vue web apps. Would that benefit from native length performance, or would Quasar and Capacitor or Cordova be a better fit? I would say, so what's really great about Capacitor is it works with any web framework, right? Of course, it's really great with Ionic Framework. That's what I showed today. But we're actually actively working on example apps now for Capacitor. So basically look for that soon. We're going to have all different types of sample projects that use Quasar, Material UI, Svelte, all these different frameworks and tools. We're going to have different examples for that because Capacitor works with all of them, and it's really great. Which one to choose, honestly, it comes down to personal preference and your skills. If you want to build and ship something fast, I would say in general, regardless of the native part of it, use what you know, right? You can spend a lot of time building, investing in the new web framework, and that's great. But if you want to, get going and actually ship something, we always recommend just start with what you know and then work your way from there. Let's see. How big is the Capacitor ecosystem? Well, I'm really happy to report that it has been, and why we're just turning so much attention into it this year and beyond, is it is growing like gangbusters. So we have had, I think it was in the last quarter, about 700,000 downloads per month, which is just one metric, and we're seeing thousands of apps and growing. So that is something that that's why we're seeing great community feedback. Everyone's loving it. So I really hope you check that out. And then how seamless is it to convert, any type of general web app to like a Vue app or using Capacitor? And I would say, of course, the effort varies because it depends on so many different factors. Like, are you using a UI library already? Do you have to incorporate one? I would say there can be some challenges with that, of course. It really depends on so many different factors that are hard to talk about in depth here. But I think that what's great about Capacitor, again, is you can start by adding it to your existing web app and deploy it really quickly, and then see how that feels for you. I would start there. Let's see. Pratik, you're asking about if AppFlow can be used with other technologies like React Native or Flutter. Not currently today. So we can build Ionic, Cordova, and Capacitor apps in the cloud with AppFlow. But that's something that we might be interested in. We want to hear feedback from everyone in the community. So if you have other apps that you'd love to have in one place there for a CI/CD system, definitely reach out to us because we're always looking for that type of feedback. Let's see. Okay. Does AppFlow allow us to create signed and unsigned builds? So those are signed builds would be ones that are use your developer account security certificates to be approved and mark you as you, so no one can authenticate as you in the App Store and upload it to your account. Yes, so AppFlow does work with all the different types of certificate type of builds as well as unsigned. So yeah, everything, which is great. So you can do your development testing. I frequently use Android because you can do debug builds without certificates. So that kind of gets rid of that headache. which is always going to be a part of any native development. And yeah, so that's definitely something you can use. David's mentioning again, the Modus Create is a great, one of our trusted partners, has originally created Ionic View for View 2. So that is an option. It's currently in beta. And so what happened is we love that team. We're really grateful to them. They, stepped up to the plate on their own and started creating Ionic framework wrappers for Vue 2 back in, at least over a year ago. And since then, as I mentioned, we're currently working on Vue 3 support, and that'll be the main one that we do support. We're working with their team actually and collaborating on, coming together to make that production ready. So, yep, good comments there. Will the Capacitor team be updating Capacitor and its first-party plugins in line with native releases? So yes, Dale, we absolutely are. In fact, the team has actually, I believe, we've shipped the last update for Capacitor 2, which is the current latest version, and now the team is heads down working on the next version of Capacitor, believe it or not. We've got a lot of great changes, and just as we've taken feedback over the last couple of years of it being around, we've taken a lot of feedback into play and are working to build with that. But despite that, we're going to, of course, keep up to date with the latest and greatest, and especially those core plugins like the camera. So there's always work being done there. It's all open source, so you can go see it yourself. We can prove it to you that way. You can interact with us and drop us a line. Dan, you're asking about how to convert from Cordova to Capacitor. Is it easy or tough? No, so this is something I'm actually really passionate about. I have a bunch of resources for you that you can check out. I would say, again, it is one of those questions realistically where it depends in the sense of course, how complex is your app? Is it been around for a long time with a lot of native features that maybe have to be reevaluated? Or, are you just using a little sprinkle of Cordova plugins or whatnot? We do have, look in our documentation. I actually wrote up a bunch of different guides for how to migrate and exact steps that should help you. And so I really recommend that you kind of take a look at that. It's very straightforward to get added in. You'd basically drop Capacitor in, and a lot of the Cordova plugins will just work. And if they don't, we have a short list of the ones. There's like 10 or 15 out of thousands that we know that don't work. And you can start testing your app and start using Capacitor. So I really recommend doing so, at least giving it a shot. It's, in just a few minutes, you can build and deploy it and see what you think about the experience. I'm an old school Cordova developer going back way before I ever joined Ionic, just building apps on my own. And I can confidently say that it really is a night and day type of developer experience. So I really hope you check it out. Let's see. Does Capacitor support social login with Firebase? Yes, it does. So anything, because they're real native projects and we give you those building blocks to do that. There are several Capacitor Firebase community plugins available now. So again, check out that community organization. There's a lot of great stuff there. Let's see. And let's see. I think we have, we're definitely running a little over, but I just love these questions. This is great. Someone asked, what are your views on Flutter and or React Native? So those are great tools and technologies. Flutter is from Google and React Native is from Facebook. Depending on what your goals are, they're definitely viable options, right? The one thing, of course, that we'll say is the goals are really different, right? So we're all about the web. We love building for PWA first, as I kind of talked about. I won't rehash all the benefits of that. You can decide if that works for you or not. With those other platforms like React Native, yes, you're using React concepts that you learn from building React web apps, but you can't bring your React web app over to React Native and therefore mobile. You have to rebuild it or start from scratch, right? And build for mobile. So Yes, you get really good performance out of that and everything, but it depends on what your time and budget and other concerns are for that one. And Flutter is using really a custom engine to build out these native apps, and it only targets mobile right now. I think they're working on web, but that's probably a long way off to being production ready. And again, that's a fine solution. Again, the web technology has been around for decades and is a really good career investment that's not going anywhere. Who knows what'll happen with this custom implementation that you have to learn. I'm sure it'll be around for quite some time, but again, it depends on what your risk level is and what you want to accomplish and how fast you want to deploy. All right, let's answer a couple more and then we'll wrap it up. Let's see, a couple questions about supporting left and right to left type of languages and things like that for other cultures. Ionic framework does support that, I believe, out of the box. So take a look at that. That would be our UI component library. You'd want to look at Ionic framework for that. Cool. And I think last question is, would you say Capacitor and the latest Ionic are production ready and stable? Absolutely. So we have, again, thousands of teams, enterprise companies that you know of that are building real apps that you probably have on your phone that are hybrid apps and that are built with Capacitor and Ionic. So absolutely production ready and stable. And we're continuing to double down on Capacitor, especially having seen just awesome responses from that, and look for that for some more. So that's all I have for today. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. But I want to say thank you again. Really excited to be here and talk about modern hybrid app development. Again, I'm Matt Netkow, and until next time, I will see you.